Right, that should be us. Hello and welcome back to episode 2 of the Blue Light Banter podcast with Emma. Once again, please excuse my setup today. I am in a hotel room with some lovely wall art. Emma, your wall's looking nice and clean, mate. I want
Thank
to
you.
apologise for my
It's fine.
background. But the work doesn't stop. We need to keep going, even if we're in some weird hotel. So, what are we talking about today? Complaints in policing, which we've all had, I'm sure. Yeah, it's never a nice thing, is it? Having
No.
complaints. Well, I think the other thing as well is like cops now getting charged with stuff, and they never seem to. We're going to go into that, but they never seem to tell the full story, like the newspapers. Hardworking father of 8. It's like, no, he was a scumbag, long criminal history,
Yeah.
firearms charges, drug charges, like repeat offenders, and yeah, it's the cops' fault for doing their job. But anyway, I digress. So Emma, have you had any complaints in your time in the police?
Weekly.
Weekly. What
Yeah,
were
I
the
think
kind of
I was very much of the opinion, and so all my mates and stuff and all my colleagues, that if you don't get a complaint, then you're probably not doing your job properly.
Yeah.
People
See,
aren't
when
going to
I
like what you
joined, that
say.
was the kind of ethos. Our
Yeah.
gaffers used to say that if you got a complaint, they'd be like, "Oh well, you're doing your job properly because you're getting in about the folk that you should be getting in about." And then it all
Yeah.
changed, like probably like 2017 onwards. It all kind of started to change in terms of complaints. Certainly in Police Scotland, in terms of how they were dealt with and how you were dealt with having had a complaint.
Hmm.
What was your guys' sort of general complaints for? Like harassment, like
Usually,
stop search stuff, or
yeah. So you had stop searches. Domestic, quite a big one, because they've said they've been hit, and then you go and act upon that piece of advice and nick the other person, and then they go, "Oh my God, why are you nicking him?" And then you get a complaint that way. They usually were quashed very easily and very quickly.
yeah.
I remember having this complaint when I worked in the domestic abuse team, because you had to do an attachment there, and it was all to do with, she was in Sussex, he was in Kent, and it was all to do with the fact that it was very civil. It was a civil dispute. It shouldn't have been
Mhm.
even come to me. But then basically when I went there, it kind of turned out that I basically reported it to social services because of the way she was talking to her kid and the way she was getting her kid to talk about her dad. And then
Mhm.
I complained because I reported it to social services. And then basically what happened was, investigated, my whole case file got investigated, and I went in so much detail about this case file that they couldn't really do much about it.
Mhm.
So then she complains again, and I remember PSD investigating me again, and I rang PSD and I went, "You can't have 2 bites of the cherry unless there's new information come to light." And then
Mhm.
basically said, and I was like, "Yeah, exactly. It's exactly the same with us.
Yeah.
If we get new information come to light about a case, you can rearrest them. If they don't,
Mhm.
then you don't have to." So they had to kind of quash the
And
whole
did all your
investigation.
complaints immediately go to PSD? Because our complaints when
No.
I first joined, like people would just phone and speak to your supervisor, like your sergeant, and your sergeant would be like, "Well, it's justified because of X, Y, and Z for certain things," and
Yeah.
then they all started to go straight to PSD. Like every single complaint was taken and then investigated.
So a lot of complaints now are kind of they try and deal with them in house. But like her, because she was so adamant and she was going through like the chief constable and stuff, it had to go to PSD, I think,
Mm-hmm.
as
It's
far
mad.
as I know,
I know.
anyway.
Like I got an early intervention. We had this thing called early interventions, and it was basically, so originally it was brought about so that if there was cops who were consistently getting complaints for like actual things, they could then be sort of highlighted and spoken to. But I think eventually on our team, every single person on the team had an early intervention. We always had the highest workload for proactive returns as well, like in the division, across the
Mm.
division. And you think you can't have both ways because we were getting pushed to go out and get stuff, and then we were all getting complaints from local drug dealers. He didn't give me a stop search receipt. He didn't search this. He searched me twice. Like he broke something in my car. One of the complaints I actually got, which led to the early intervention, we used to do like the town centre plan, and mainly we would just try and get everyone out the town centre. No one wanted any drama. Everyone just wanted to go home. And there was a drunk girl one night. It was me and one of the guys, and we were sitting in the car on New Street in Paisley, and there was a drunk girl who came out one of the nightclubs, and she was sitting there all night, like by herself, and there was like basically no one else on the street. So we're like, right, let's just take her home because she'll probably live somewhere local. So we went over and spoke to her, and she was actually all right. She was like steaming drunk, and her phone was ringing, so I answered her phone, and it was one of her mates, and I was like, "Where are you guys? Like, we're here with your friend outside this nightclub." And they said, "Oh, we're just at the taxi rank. Come and drop her here, and we can all take her home." So we're like, "Cool, we don't need to take her home. We'll drop her and leave her in the care of her friends." So we drove round. All of our friends were sober, like super sober, super normal. We dropped her off with the friends. They got in a taxi and went home. And then we actually got a complaint. And I don't even know what the complaint would be for that we didn't take her home. And it's like, well, how can that be taken as a complaint? How can I now get an early intervention and have to wear a body camera and have a meeting with the chief inspector because of this thing, which isn't actually a complaint? Like, yes, somebody's complained about
Yeah.
something, but it's not complaint worthy because since when did the police have to take people home? Like, we don't. If there's an adult who's out drunk and we leave them with their friends, that should be the end of it. Like, it's the police. It's not an emergency, so we don't have to deal with it.
No.
So stuff like that always kind of annoyed me for things that, again, because we were in the proactive unit, a lot of stuff we would do would be drug stuff, so it'd be stop searches, but sometimes you'd be searching the same people day in and day out because there was always information about those people being actively involved, and then we'd go out and search them, and then they would put complaints in, so that we would then stop. And quite a lot of times, sometimes we would actually have supervisors saying, "Right, just start leaving them alone because they're making too many complaints, and it's a headache." You think, how can that be? Like, how can that be right? Do you know what I
How do
mean?
you how do you feel supervisors dealt with stuff?
Depends on the supervisor. Depends
How,
on the supervisor.
how do you feel as a whole though, on it as a general?
I think, I mean, it depends. I think it depends on the supervisor, as I said, because we had a lot of gaffers, and I had a gaffer in particular once who everyone's going to know who I'm talking about when I say this, but quite a lot of people like didn't like her because of the way that she like did her job because she was super strict, she was super hard on probationers, but I was always out hard, like I was always super hard working. I was always out getting returns, even when I was on the shift, and she really liked me. And one day I got a complaint for, I can't remember what it was. It was a stop search or something like that. And she was just really good about it. We actually had a fatal accident inquiry as well. Well, she was my sergeant and she was superb, like superb from the get go with it. But I think it depends on the gaffer because sometimes it depends who you get, but they might be wanting evidence for something to throw you under the bus so they can then move up to inspector or whatever. So it definitely depends on the supervisor. I think once it changed, like our complaint system used to just go to your supervisor. So like your gaffer would be like, "Oh, by the way, I spoke to so and so on the phone today. They're not happy about X, Y, and Z, whatever." And then it would basically kind of get dealt with, or you would explain, "This is why I've done it," and your gaffer would be like, "Cool, that's fine." And then it changed. I can't remember when it changed. I think it was like the criminal justice thing. And all of the complaints started going to like PSD immediately. So none of the complaints
Yeah.
would go via your supervisor. Your supervisor would then be contacted by them and say, "Oh, by the way, you've got a meeting with PSD, or they've contacted me about X. We're just going to wait and see what happens with it." And then it was kind of out of their control almost. But yeah, I mean, I never really had any bad experiences with complaints with supervisors, to be fair. They were all reasonable. What about you? Were your supervisors good with dealing with complaints?
It's like the same as you. Some were, some weren't. Like definitely local response supers were a lot better.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say supervisors, because it went up to a higher level in firearms, um,
Yeah.
it wasn't that fantastic. The support that you got wasn't great, so that's why I ended up leaving, because I would be confident if I pulled the trigger of anybody that I'd get the support from any of the firearms SLT, to be honest.
Was
Um,
that because there's a couple? Sorry, there's a couple of folk I work with who do work in firearms roles at the moment, and that seems to be like the sort of general theme almost that
mm.
gets their job, but because of like recent events, everyone's actually terrified to do their job properly. So, like that's what I
What?
think. I mean, I've never done that style of role, but do you think it would like? Is it always in your mind if you're going through a door doing a job
Yeah.
and
Oh yeah, 100%. Like I think that thing in the Met happened, and then I got called to a firearms job. Literally, I think it was a couple of days later, and I remember being first stick on the and first position on the door, and I was like, because
Was just the guy in
this,
the car.
yeah, the bloke that
Mm-hmm.
I went to was seen with a gun, so I was like, if he squares up to me and I pull this trigger, I don't think I'm going to have the support from my SLT.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always going through your mind, and the SLT and firearms was shit. If I'm gonna, I'll say it out loud now. And I questioned some skippers there as well. If I'm going to be honest,
I think that like the police forces now, even like the sort of media, like we all seem to like pander to a tiny minority of people who hate the police. Do you know what I mean? Like, I just don't understand it because for me, as a citizen living in the UK, I would want to know if there's firearms cops going to a firearms job with a bad man, that all of them would feel supported by members of the public and like supervisors on the job so that they can
yeah.
actually do their job properly. And I think it is a tiny, tiny minority that just hate the police. And I think that's the
Thing,
one thing, like when you're in the job, it's difficult to remember that it is just a
yeah.
tiny minority of people that dislike the police.
The thing is, especially where I used to be, they are so scared to send you to a firearms job. They would more than likely send local response officers, and you stay
Mhm.
around the corner, and local response officers all they have a taser, and you're like,
Mhm.
brilliant. Like they're not giving you authority to get your big gun out basically, but you can self deploy your Glock. But it's
Mhm.
just like some jobs that came over the radio, you would fully expect us to go to.
Yeah.
I know the Met are a lot better with sending firearms.
Mhm.
Like they are really good with sending firearms, but it's just it's not great, and you're just so scared of getting that kind of complaint. Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, I
it's
think
just
that's the thing. Like, I don't think there would ever be any cops. I mean, I was in the police for just under 8 years, and there was never, like, I never met any bad people in the police. Like, in all honesty, if I had, I would just say, like, there was never anyone who went to work and thought, I just want to go in and, like, hurt an innocent member of the public.
no.
Do you know what I mean? And if you realistically think about it, like, all of these incidents, has there ever been like I don't know, right? But I'm guessing there's probably not been. Has there ever been an actual person who has never been in bother with the police, who has got zero criminal history, who is behaving, who complies with the police when they turn up, who has been injured or fatally wounded by the police in the UK? Probably not.
So
I mean, do the police harass you on a daily basis in the UK?
absolutely not.
No, no.
Just
I
let
mean, I
me
don't
crack
think
on.
apart from
Well,
being young and having the police
unless
stop me now and again. Did you get
unless you're on
stopped
about
recently?
clients, that harass me. No, I'm joking. They don't
No,
harass me.
no. I mean, like the only time I actually got like or like received any sort of like police involvement in my life was like see when I was young and I'd passed my driving test and you're out like driving about like 2 o'clock in the morning and the police stop you. But see if you're
Yeah,
just sound, like most of the time it'd be like, all right, okay, where he's going, just driving about, mate. Right, we're just gonna check the car out. Cool. See you later on. Like I've
yeah.
never been pinned to the floor and assaulted by the police. Do you know what I mean?
No,
Like, it's
definitely not.
ridiculous. I don't
But
know why they just pander to these people. And then the thing that annoys me the most is when they put it on social media, like, oh, father of four, like, victimized by cop. Well, no. If you actually wrote criminal with years and years and years and years and years of criminal history, firearms charges, shot by police for not complying, and information about him being in possession of a firearm. Like,
yeah, I think this. You know what ruined it is this whole George Floyd thing, and people can't get into
but
the.
he also had a criminal record. There was also
Exactly.
information on the day that he was in possession of a firearm.
So some people are thick, and they don't realise that was in America. That we are English. We have a completely different way of dealing with things. We don't carry guns. That is not our style of PST. We don't kind of deal with people by leaning on any necks or anything like that. People
Yeah,
can't get into their thick heads that we are completely different. And I'm like, how is something that's happened
yeah,
in America come all the way over to England? And there was protests about it,
yeah.
about police brutality. I was like, are you fucking having a laugh? Like, I'm 5'1". When am I ever going to be brutal to a
No.
member of the
But when
public?
I joined the police, even cops on the shift, we didn't have tasers. Like we never had
No.
tasers. You never even saw firearms cops. Sometimes they would come in and sit in the peace room and do nothing, as you lot tend to do. But most of the time, you never see them. They would never turn up to stuff unless it was something which was justified if people had warning signals for X, Y, and Z from previous incidents.
Yeah.
But then if I also had that and the police turned up to the house and said, look, Greg, firearms guys are here. Why don't you just come out and comply with us? I'd be like, okay, I'll probably just do what they tell me to do. Do you know what I mean? And yeah, that incident still shouldn't have happened with the neck kneeling and all that. But we don't do that. It's not an OST technique to kneel on someone's neck.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
It's not something we get taught in PST at all. We don't lean on necks.
Yeah.
And then you've got all the mobile phone generation now that are like,
Yeah. Well, that's the
I'm
worst.
like,
I see also, right, for all of the cops for all 5 people who are probably watching this, you can also seize people's mobile phones as evidence. So do that, just seize their phones as evidence. People will stop filming the polls pretty quick, steal their new iPhone, and it's gone for 14 months whilst the investigation's undergoing.
It's just
and
annoying.
also, right, this is one thing that really pisses me off. If someone is detained for a 23 search, they're not allowed to use their phone. See the amount of time that you see people being stopped and they're using their phone. Oh, I'm filming you for my safety. Well, actually, you're not, because you're detained.
Yeah.
For the purposes of a search under Section 23 of the Misuse of Drugs Act, you're not allowed to use a phone. And see if they do, just jail them for obstruction. It's the number one thing, because you see these videos all the time of people who are detained using their phone, videoing the police.
Aware of their powers, mate. That's why.
But this is what I mean. People should be. Why is it not being taught anymore that they can't use their phone if they're detained? If they're arrested, they can't use their phone. I mean, think about it this way, right? If you stop someone, I know you're probably well aware of this, right? But just from anyone else, if you stop a bad man who has drugs in his car and you get enough drugs from that car to go and search his house, but you let him use his phone at any point, do you think he's probably going to text someone and say, by the way, just to the jail, can you go and get all that shit out of my house? Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's always justified.
Aren't they?
Always justified.
Mate, I remember I was with this couple once, and they're bearing in mind in firearms, we got the SLT were very much like, you need to go out and do this many searches, you need to do this, you need to do this. So anyway, there was an incident that happened in a town near where the Nick was, and they basically said, you can there's the ability to stop search anyone that fits a certain description. So I spotted these 2 people that fit the description. The person I was with got out the car with me and was like, "You can't stop search these. These are males." And I was like, "Yeah, I fucking can." But because the obviously the nature of what the SLT were breeding was the fact that you need to get as many basically marks next to your name as possible for this. So it's actually causing people to be dickheads about it.
Yeah.
And I was like, "What? Have it. Fucking, you can do all the paperwork. I don't care." Didn't find anything on him anyway, but I was just like, do you think I'm really that fit? Because he'd been in quite a while, that I don't know my stop search powers. Do you really? That is insulting to me.
I don't know why it's not passed down. We all the sort of proactive units got disbanded during the first lockdown, and I was still in the job in 2020, and I got put back to response, and I'd only been there for a week or so, and we'd had so many good returns, just for proactive stop searches and all that while I was back in response. But everyone else had no time, or they didn't have any time to do stop searching, right? So then the gaffer pulled me in, and I thought, fuck, here we go, he's going to get me into trouble. And he's like, Greg, you've only been here for a week, but he was like, you're getting loads and loads of good sort of proactive returns. He was like, so there's lots of probationers on the shift that would like to work with you. He was like, there was 2 or 3 people come in and ask to work with you. So anyway, worked with one of them one night. We stopped the car, loads of drugs, knuckle duster, offensive weapons, all this stuff, right? So I've never done that before. One of the other girls, we'd just been to a house breaking, right? Caught the bad guy from the house breaking. 2 of the other folk took the body to custody. She then said, I've never really done a stop search. So I saw one of the cars driving by with one of the Neds in it. Recent information to suggest that he was involved in sale and supply of controlled drugs, which is enough to stop the car anyway. So we stopped the car, stinking of weed. We got a bag of weed off one of them and a massive, massive knife off the other one in the back, right? So that was 2 days on the trot. 3rd day, I was working with another girl, and there was information suggesting that this guy, obviously no names, was involved in the sale and supply of controlled drugs from his home address. He was out meeting buyers on foot, regularly wearing this jacket, the most obvious jacket. So we were driving by. There was Ned number 1 walking by. So I said to her, right, get out and detain him. I was driving. Why are we detaining him? Because there's information. Yeah, but why are we detaining him? I was like, oh, fucking shut up. So I literally just stopped the car, got out, searched him. He'd like 3 bags of weed on him or whatever. And it's just stuff like that. You think, why do people not know about this? Like, no one's doing their job properly. If you just
No.
mindlessly drive past folk, again, if you're out working with probationers now, they're just sitting on their phones. They're not even out looking for, there's a bad guy, there's so and so for so and so, he's meant to be punting. No one cares anymore. They're just sitting on their phones going to calls. And that annoys.
And if people don't know their shit, what's it going to mean when there's a complaint?
Yeah. Why did you search them? Oh, I don't know. Greg told me to.
Yeah.
No, we searched them because there's countless recent information suggesting that, literally saying, this guy's out selling drugs wearing this jacket, he's meeting people on foot. Yeah. We saw him on foot outside his house with that jacket on and got drugs on him. Like, that's justified. That's not even going to go to court. I never actually went to court. It's justified every single day of the week. Do you know what I mean? And yet people aren't confident in their powers. They'll stop people. They'll use their phones. Yeah. It then turns into complaints because people don't know what they're doing.
No, exactly. So it's like, partly I don't think they're dealt with correctly then, but partly I think the officers they've been brought in now either aren't being educated properly or they aren't proactive enough. They just sit there and answer fucking calls, and I'm like, no, part of the policing, like, you think back in the day there was no CCTV. You had to go and find your own work. You had to find the bad men. So go out and still do that, because that's the exciting part of policing to me. Not the answering calls and going to a load of tosh about how Susan's thrown a fucking roast chicken at Gary or whatever. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, that's not the exciting part of policing to me. The exciting part of policing is going out, stopping motors, pursuits, all that sort of shit.
And that's when you get the exciting stuff. That's when you become better at dealing with incidents, because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know when you stop a car if there's going to be 4 guys, 5 guys, no insurance, if they're going to take off from you, if somebody's going to get out immediately and run. So you start like determining people's body language. Like, if you see folk fidgeting in the car and there's loads and loads of movement, you think one of them's 100% got something down his trousers. 100%.
It's like these people at the moment, they come in and they go, I'll say, let's do a no insurance jobby. That's always an in to a car. I don't care what anyone says, it's always an in. And you're like, oh, I don't do traffic. Oh, what? I was like, what do people always use in criminal activity? It's a vehicle. What do you need? You need an in for a check of some sort, even if it's no MOT. And then you actually look into the car. Oh, there's grinds. Oh, there's fucking everything. Oh, let me door. Oh, by the way, you're detained for a purpose of search. Oh, look at all that I fucking found.
Yeah.
And
off the back of basic stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, but they're just so bred into them in policing school that it's like, oh, it was for us. Oh, traffic. But when I got to section and when I went on area, it was like my tutor was like well into it. So he was like really good, and he basically explained the same thing to me, and that's how I became quite a proactive person, because he bred it into me.
And it's the easiest way to like identify people as well. Like, see if there's information on about folk dealing from a vehicle. Like, it's the easiest way. There's that car. Let's stop it. But people are just so scared of like any sort of, because they're going to shout at you. They're Neds. They don't want you to search them if they've got stuff in their car, and then they get hostile. It's like, we just need to be confident dealing with them and go, well, look, mate, you can shut up, you're getting to jail. Like, we can do this easily and take what you've got in the car because we know you've got something anyway, or you can get the jail for obstruction and a breach of the peace, and we'll take all your stuff anyway. So either way, mate, you can decide how this is going to go. Exactly. And then most of the time, they will go, look, do you know what, I've got a bit of weed in the glove box, or I've got a bit of coke over there. And then you search them anyway, and you always find something else as well, but you just need to be confident dealing with it.
Somebody not having a clue what the ANPR was in the area, and I always had it up so it's flashing.
Well, see, we never had these in our cars. I think, like, see if you went to Police Scotland, you're going back in time. Like,
it was mobile, so you got it on. You got the app on the mobile eventually, and then
we didn't have mobiles either. We only just got them. No, we only just got them. Only just when I think it was like my last year when I was out and about, we got phones, but none of us knew how to use them because we were in the proactive. We never get like a input on them. I say the proactive were in like the violent instructions. It was like a proactive team. It wasn't the proactive team. But
they were good, to be fair.
Mobile. Whenever the NPR, we just used to have to do it in our radios. Like, you'd get a PNC check for a vehicle. But again, rapid. Do you know what I mean? There was never any issues not doing it. But then again, they started making you justify PNC checks on cars. Like why?
Oh
Like,
yeah.
see, there's a car that looks like a shitbox.
I
Like
had to justify so much stuff that I put through. It was
yeah.
insane.
But then you used to have to start like if you were doing it on your mobile device, we would then start doing it on there when we got them. But then you would need to like note why you'd done it for each one. So they just make policing more difficult for cops who actually want to go out and do it. So like you're right
Yeah.
because they're just breeding like a whole generation of just lazy police who have no idea what they're doing. And that's the thing for like officer safety reasons. Folk are afraid to actually get involved and get hands on with people. But you need to remember, you're the police. You are
Yeah.
the police. Like between members of the public and bad people, it is you. So see if it scares you in any way, shape, or form, leave and go and do something else. Yeah. So in terms of complaints, before we go, complaints from other cops. Have you ever had complaints from other cops?
Oh yeah. Knobhead.
Yeah.
That's what I like to call her.
Call her just one
Yeah.
instance particular.
It was I'm not going to say, obviously, people know where I used to work, but female firearm sergeant. Obviously, it's not something that people can relate to, is because I was getting accused of earning out of my second business, which is this, when I was in the police, which wasn't true, but they didn't have the balls to come up to me and ask me, which I should think as a sergeant you'd want to do that. But obviously they weren't, not very well liked anyway, and obviously I had to be in their bonnet about something. That's by the by. I'm not in there anymore. I'm the one that's kind of have got a job that I love, and she's still doing something she doesn't like.
Yeah.
But I think of something terrible, means another police officer murder someone, obviously report it. But I think if it's something that can be dealt with face to face and having a chat and going, I don't agree with that, then I've actually complained about another officer because they actually made fun of a disabled person in front of me. Like they fully took the piss, like fully, and it wasn't okay. And I was like, and they just couldn't understand after speaking to them why I was so pissed off about it. And I was like, do you know what? I'm going to go fucking report this to the skipper because it wasn't okay. But it was
okay, and it not like
it was bang out of all, like it wasn't just taking the piss, it was fully like it was really bad. And I'm not that sort of person that kind of will do that. I always have words with people if I've got an issue with people. But I was fully up for reporting it. Like I don't give a fuck.
That's the easiest way to go though, isn't it? Dealing with it. I remember once specific. This was even before I went. This must have been like 2015, 2007. I was in response. And me and my neighbour at the time were just super proactive. Like every single day we were coming back with like 3 or 4 sort of positive returns for drugs mostly. Sometimes weapons, sometimes like 5-3s, getting warrants, house turns and all that. And one day we came into work and there was this guy who was relatively well known. And we came into muster and the inspector was in muster. And he was like, look, we need to get this guy. He was like, today we need to get this guy. So immediately me and my neighbour went, well, we know where he kind of hangs about. So we went out. And caught it. Turned into a kind of funny story of how he was apprehended. But we basically went out and caught the guy immediately. And then Control tried to send us to a domestic. And I think we were like 313 or something at the time. And they said, like, Kilo Romeo 313, can you attend an ongoing domestic? And I says, no, negative. We've just arrested X for this, like, grade apprehension warrant and all this other stuff. So we're going to go to custody. Can you make whatever custody officer it was aware that we are en route? So we got the guy that everyone wanted to get in the division. We've been looking for him for ages. We got him within about 10 minutes of being on shift. And then I got back to the office and we get pulled in by the gaffer and he was talking about like splitting me and my neighbour up and all that. And he was like, a few folk in the shift are annoyed because you guys are going out and again, you're not going to calls. And I was like, but we got the guy that you just told us to go and get. Would you rather we just didn't do that and just sat in the office? Because everyone else on the shift sat in the office. We went out immediately with a car to go and find this bad guy. And everyone else, and you think, how can you moan? And stuff like that just pisses me off. Like, see if I'd done something genuinely wrong and someone complained, I'd be like, right, cool. I was out of line. I respect it. But for stuff like that, you think, why are you just being pure snaky? Like it's like being back in school sometimes, isn't it? Going and like telling the gaffers. Yeah, it's brutal. It is brutal.
That's a police in a nutshell.
What's your worst? Before we go, what's your worst complaint ever been? Like the most pathetic complaint?
pathetic.
Yeah, from a bad
Oh, it
person
was
or
calling. I basically stopped a guy. He was doing 80 mile per hour. It was school time, picking out of school. He was doing 80 down this road. Knew that the kids were getting out, so obviously followed him, blues on, and I stopped him. And I said, he says, "Why have you stopped me?" And I went, "Were you driving like an absolute moron?" That was basically what I said. That was probably word for word what I said. I had my body worn on, so I don't give a fuck really. And I basically gave him words of advice. I was like, why the fuck didn't I give him a ticket? But anyway, I gave him words of advice and he booked off. I got a complaint for it because I called him a moron. And I basically was made to go around to his house to apologise. I went round to his house and I says, well, I said, I'm not going to apologise, but I'll give you a ticket. So that's basically what I did.
Good.
Yeah. Idiot.
Yeah, I wouldn't be apologising to anyone. I'd just take a day for it and go up.
I ain't apologising. He got words of advice, the cheeky bastard.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing as well. You think, see if you get let off with something like that, and the police use their discretion and go, look, mate, don't drive like an idiot. Just got the road. You'd be like, right, cool. Wait, my neck, and you're going to go, I'm going to make a complaint about them. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely idiot.
Anyways, mate, once again, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Yes.
We'll reconvene for next week for episode 3. Thank you to everyone who watched. We actually got people comment end on the last one. Did you see that? I said if anyone's watched it, comment end. So we actually need to send them stuff. I think it was 2. Who was it? There was 2 folk. I know them. One of them.
I know Claire did it. Claire watched it.
Aye, but they should comment end. Can I go back and comment end now?
I don't know whether she did.
I think there was 2 who commented end. So we'll need to send them something. Anyways, cheers, Trip. It's been a pleasure as always, and we'll catch